In the following tutorial, I am going to ink this ear from the example drawing LD177 from Luxor Temple that I've used before, just to demonstrate to you how to deal with sun and shadow transitions and how to be aware of certain elements of the ear when it's inked. It's been already penciled at the temple, and it's a pretty irregular 18 Dynasty ear shape with a long earlobe that's quite rectangular at the bottom. Of course, some of it was shaved off surface, so that's why I made a label called uncarved in certain areas where the line doesn't continue, but there is no visible damage on the surface. So of course this is a little blurry because the original pencil drawing was created at 300 dpi, so it needed to be upscaled by 4 for inking purposes to be able to make it part of our regular standard 1200 dpi environment. So I just set up a blank layer for this demonstration, turn the opacity down to 70%, so I'll be able to see my ink lines and my pencil lines at the same time. I'm going to use a combination of tools as before, mostly using the smoothing tool, but also try to use the vector tools for longer curves. So basically I picked a 10 pixel sun line to start with this drawing, and I'm going to go very slowly with the smoothing turned on and follow the curves exactly as they are over the surface. Here I'm going to move outwards a little bit as it's going to be a sun and shadow transition, so I have to switch to do this manually and not by vectors. I have to switch to a thinner brush stroke. I'll use the trace weight for this transition, because if I would use the sun, the same thickness for the line weight, I would probably end up adding lots of bumps to the original brush stroke. So with the 6, I start gently pulling it out a little bit and make it thicker towards the bottom. And of course, since this is going to be shadow from here on, I can also pick a shadow line weight and add to this area here, so I'll know exactly what transition I need to reach as I move towards this shadow line weight. So I'm going to add a little more here and maybe a little bit on the outside. So now this looks like if it would turn into this shadow line right here. I will pick a very small eraser and cut these edges of the brush strokes here and here, because of course it's made digitally. It ends up with a curvy tip, which I don't much prefer as an ink drawing. Now we are ready for the bottom, so I'm going to continue, and as you can see, as I reach the lobe, I have to add these stylistic attributes, like for example this turning point right here. It's very important to move the lines according to these little nuances that appear on the drawing. So of course in the front I switch back to the sun line, and then I move all the way down with the tragus and then move upwards with the same movement. And here again I'm going to add a bit of a shadow line, but this time I'll use I'm gonna use the shadow line width and then just shave off the transitional part right here. So I'm going to change this a little bit like that and make the turn less sharp, and then I'm going to have to deal with the internal part where I'm going to use a half shadow. So I'm going to start right here with the shadow line, with the half shadow line, excuse me, all the way up, follow the portion right here, and then move into the sunline territory. So as I come from here, from the bottom, I will have to manage to blend these two features together. So I have two ways to do that. Either I switch to an eraser, the eraser, and using the smoothing tool, start shaving off the line to blend in with the sun line, which sometimes, of course, can be tricky. And then switch back to the brush and smoothen the transition. So this is one way to do it, and of course there is another way where I'd use the vector tool and set up vector points for a path all the way through and move the line. Because it's not a tremendously large feature, I prefer going freehand as much as possible. So obviously this is much faster and sometimes results a more natural transition. The only other portion I have to fix is this lower portion, because this is regular shadow line. So I'm going to switch to the trace line weight and just add a little bit of extra line weight to this bottom portion like that. So now we know that while this is a regular shadow line, from up here it turns into a half shadow. And of course normally I would have a plaster blob here, which I can actually add for the sake of this demonstration. So I'm going to add a plaster blob right here, just so we have the full drawing of the ear presented. So this is how it's drawn. Of course, it was a lucky situation because I didn't have the bottom transition, and this transition here was also easier to make with this gap. However, you can deal with the same using the same method with the complete ear whatsoever.